Hi everybody, thanks for joining me. Today I've got a surprise for you. I want to cover a topic that we haven't addressed yet in our videos. Filters. Filters are a really interesting conversation. We can do a lot with filters. We've done some interesting things up to this point with our cinematography. We know how to manipulate depth of field. We know how to manipulate shutter speed. We know what the significance of 24 frames is, and we know how to go off speed. We know how to use different lenses and what those ingredients do for our cinematography. But what we haven't covered in depth at this point is filters. And filters can be used for a variety of different effects that can enhance not just the aesthetics of our cinematography, but they can also help us in corrective measures, sometimes when we need to make minor adjustments with the photography involving color or involving polarization or involving neutral density. In other words, the exposure effects that we can implement with filters can be a handy tool, particularly if we're shooting with cameras with high native ISOs. Just yesterday, we were shooting some beautiful images of the fountain downtown, and it was so bright out that all of the ND built into the camera still wasn't enough for us to get a nice usable exposure at a wider f-stop. So we had a little bit of depth of field to work with. So we had to add additional ND filters. So there's lots of different effects that we can achieve. But before I get into all of that, I just wanted to talk to you about the variety of different filters that are available and which style might be the best one for you. They exist in several different fashions. In the old days, when we were using film cameras, we used to use things called rattan filters from Kodak. This is one here. And basically what it is it's a gelatin filter. And it comes just in a generic 2x2 inch square, because the Panaflex cameras have a little filter tray behind the lens barrel where you can put a little tab of corrective filtration inside the camera and do things like change from daylight to tungsten color values for shooting on stage, or you can put in neutral density filters. And this is what they look like. It's just a delicate little vellum, and if I show you against a piece of white card, you can see how I actually cut out a little piece to put into a film camera, and that's what it is. You just cut it out with scissors, and we stuck it in the Panaflex. This happens to be an 85 rattan gel, so if we have daylight film stock in the camera and we want to warm it up, or we want to run inside and grab a quick shot, we could stick an 85 rattan gel behind the lens on the Panaflex, and all of a sudden we've switched from daylight to tungsten filtration, which is nowadays, in the digital world, the flip of a switch on your camera. So we moved from rattan gels from Kodak, which are a little bit of an antiquated way of doing things, but nevertheless, filters come in these nice threaded glass items here. If I put a white card behind it, you can sort of see this one I think is just a UV filter, protective filter, or it takes a UV glare off your images. And these come in a variety of different thread sizes. And what you might be used to is your DSLR or the kit lens for your Sony camera. And you may just have a lens that has an accessory size, and this one is posted right on the end of this lens. This is an Olympus lens, a 9 to 18 millimeter on this Lumix GH4. And if you look close enough, you can see that this particular filter has a 72 designation on it, and that indicates the accessory size of this particular lens. Your kit lens will have a different accessory size. This Carl Zeiss, for instance, has an accessory size on it, which is actually not posted on here. The Rokinon as well has an accessory size of, I think this one is also 72 millimeters. And right up to our large cinema lenses, which have filter accessory sizes of 114 millimeters. So a variety of different threaded filters, and they simply screw on the front, and you apply them and their effect to whatever you're capturing on camera. Moving along, we have cut filters, and cut filters come in a variety of sizes. The most popular cut filter that emerged in the late 70s and early 80s were the Koken family of cut filters, and these were made out of photographically clear resin in France by the Koken company. And if I show you the white card again, you can see this one is a warming filter. So you can see it applies just a delicate amount of warmth to the image. Now, obviously, you can achieve many of these effects by selecting custom white balance values in your camera. You can also achieve some of these effects in post-production if you use DaVinci Resolve or if you use Adobe Premiere and then you apply speed grade to your video images. You can do a lot of this in post-production. In fact, the Tiffin company, the folks who make some of these filters, offer a digital effects pack as a product for sale by Tiffin, and it's digital filter plugins that you can apply to Premiere or Final Cut Pro, and it will have essentially the effects of each of these individual filters in a digital version, and you just drag and drop those filters onto your footage in post while you're editing. This method, this workflow, is for in-camera effects. So there may be a variety of reasons why you want to achieve in-camera effects. You might be working on a commercial or a TV show, TV shows in particular, where you're in charge of the cinematography, you're making these aesthetic choices, but for one reason or another, you can't supervise the post-production process closely enough to make sure that the creative choices that you've made on the set with the director are carrying forward through the pipeline into post-production. So doing in-camera filtration is one of the ways to ensure that your creative intentions are following your work through the pipeline, and a variety of hands are touching the material and making adjustments, and it becomes obvious to them through the metadata that you've used filters, and through your ample notes that you make on the set. It's very abundantly clear to the people in post-production that you've used warming filters, you've used polarizers, you've used graduated filters, you've used something in camera to bake in or lock that effect into the photography. So there's some really good wisdom behind creating these effects in camera, and it's fun. I mean, it's really fun to see some of these images evolve in camera while you're shooting on location. Just yesterday, as I said, we were shooting a fountain downtown, and it was in the afternoon, and the sun was a little bit behind the buildings and the fountain, so it was a nice backlight. But unfortunately, what happens is you make an aesthetic choice. Do you want the sun to be your backlight? If you do, it's going to brighten up your sky values. If you want to bias for sky values, you need to shoot in the morning when the sun is front lighting your subject, and then of course you don't get the nice backlight qualities that you get from the sun in the afternoon. So we went with backlight on the subject, on the fountain, to help with the water and the spray. Makes everything look nice, and you get nice little spectral hits. But the sky wasn't exactly ideal for photography. So we put what was called a Paradise Blue grad on the camera, which helped us darken the sky while leaving the rest of the image clear on the bottom of the filter. And I'm going to show you what I mean. This is an ND6 neutral density grad filter. And grad means, you might remember graduated or gradient terminology from your Photoshop class, your digital image making, where we use gradients on color values to make them look three-dimensional? Well, a gradient filter or a grad filter is a neat gimmick. It's a good tool to have in your bag. This one, like I said, is an N6 or neutral density 6 grad. And you can see the effect. You see how it's dark on the top and clear on the bottom? So if this filter goes in front of the lens, imagine that your sky is behind all of this N6 graduated filtration, and everything in your foreground is behind clear optical glass. So you can basically darken the sky by 2 stops and not affect anything in the foreground. So if the sky is too bright, but the foreground is just fine, an ND grad might be the filter that you want to go with. So there's lots of interesting reasons to use filters. And the type of equipment that you're using is going to dictate the size and style of the filter that you're going to use. I like these 4x4 cut glass filters. They're what we call professional filters. But they have some interesting benefits to them, and I want to talk to you about those here in a few minutes.